This is India Global. I'm Gauri Dwivedi. As always, we start the show with the big stories that we are covering today. First up, Pakistan's flop show at United Nations as Islamabad's efforts to internationalize Kashmir completely backfires. All nations lecture Pakistan over the Pahalgam terror attack as it stood completely isolated and exposed. Amidst continued tensions with Pakistan, India is set to undertake massive security drills on the 7th of May across 250 districts in the country. Non-military action against Pakistan continues. India is set to releases large amounts of water into Pakistan. The Trump versus Harvard showdown continues as Donald Trump bars Harvard from future research grants and blocks the grants for Harvard until the demands of his administration are met by the college. Ahead of President Trump's Middle East trip and Yemen's Houthis' attack on Israel's largest airport, Tel Aviv now launches a new Gaza plan where more areas in the Gaza Strip may come under the IDF's expanded operations. Is the ceasefire further away than ever before? And this year's annual Met Gala once again saw celebrities walking the red carpet, making statements and courting their share of controversy. SRK makes his grand debut, and so does Diljit Dosanjh, who chose to have the map of Punjab and not India on his cream jacket. Big story on India Global this Tuesday, viewers. The mask has slipped and the world is watching, and it's not buying Pakistan's denials. At a closed-door meeting, the United Nations Security Council has slammed Islamabad over its alleged role in last month's horrific Pahalgam terror attack that claimed 26 innocent lives, 25 tourists, one local gunned down in cold blood. The name Lashkar-e-Taiba echoes again and again, and this time in global condemnation. Pakistan's efforts to paint it as a false flag operation were flatly rejected, not just by India but by the world. UNSC members raised alarm over Pakistan's dangerous nuclear rhetoric and recent missile tests, calling them nothing but an act of provocation. Before we go any further, listen into what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had to say. We come back and talk more about what is the next steps for New Delhi as Pakistan's lies stand exposed. It stands completely isolated.
Tensions between India and Pakistan are at their highest in years. I deeply respect and I am profoundly grateful to the government of people of both countries and their significant contributions to the work of the United Nations, not least UN peacekeeping. And so it pains me to see relations reaching a boiling point. I understand the raw feelings following the awful terror attack in Pahalgam on 22 April. I once again strongly condemn that attack and extend my condolences to the families of the victims. Targeting civilians is unacceptable, and those responsible must be brought to justice through credible lawful means. It is also essential, especially at this critical hour, to avoid a military confrontation that could easily spin out of control. Now is the time for maximum restraint and stepping back from the brink.
India has to stand against terrorism there as well. We'll do everything we can in the U.S. to support those efforts. And I think that's all part of this relationship as it develops. The Trump administration clearly understands the importance of that relationship and clearly understands the importance of the threat of terrorism. And so I think if that threat is increased, I think you'll see the administration, my belief is that they will focus more energy and resources and time to help assist with that. That's certainly our hope. So.
Pakistan's doublespeak, its sheltering of terror has been completely exposed by India, by the world, at the UNSC. To talk more about what's the larger ramifications from here on and India's successful diplomatic maneuvers, Ruchira Kamboj, India's former permanent representative to the United Nations, joins me live. to talk more about this and unpack this pivotal development. Ms. Kampoji, thank you so much, ma'am, for joining me to talk more about this. Let me start first by asking you in terms of how do you read the failed attempt by Pakistan to try and turn this into a successful PR stunt at the UNSC?
Well, thank you, Gauri, and greetings to your viewers. What I would like to say here is that most UN meetings can be judged by outcomes or by support. So let's take a look at both. Was there an outcome to this meeting? Was there an outcome document? Nothing. There was no resolution, certainly. There was no statement. There was no press release. Instead, what happened? It appears from what we have been told that Pakistan was grilled during this meeting about the involvement of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, about the targeting of civilians by religion, about accountability. And on top of that, terrorism was condemned unequivocally by one and all members, as we are told, which is absolutely correct. Terrorism is a reprehensible act, and who can condone it today? So if you add all of this together, not to mention also the fact that Pakistan's escalatory rhetoric was also, they were asked to tone it down. And importantly, they were asked to look into the issue within a bilateral ambit, resolving the issues between India and Pakistan without trying to internationalize it, which has been India's position all along. So if you take all of this together, you will see that it was certainly no victory for Pakistan. Then let's look at support. From what we are told again, after the meeting was held, the Pakistan PR was isolated at the press takeout point just outside the UN Security Council. Now that is very important. I myself remember standing next to PRs when they were pushing or pressing forward with a particular cause that was important to them. And that is very strong symbolic support. But nobody was there, as we are told. So there was no support. Pakistan was isolated. So if you look at the outcome, nothing at all. If you look at support, there was none whatsoever.
Indeed, there was no support. But Pakistan's repeated failure to gain traction in the UNSC, it reflects the world's recognition, doesn't it, ma'am, that terrorism, proxy warfare emanates from Pakistan?
Yeah, I think, Gauri, the answer to this question is in your question itself. And I think Pakistan's track record is known to one and all. It's not a mystery to anyone, including at the United Nations. I myself was at the United Nations for those 2 years, and I do recall that they used each and every opportunity to raise the Kashmir issue. In fact, so much so that it had almost become a standing joke amongst delegates. And they were very isolated on this issue. Their rhetoric was always very, very abrasive, very aggressive, and it had nothing to do whatsoever with the issue that was being discussed. So I think repeatedly raising this issue speaks of a certain desperation to me. Performative, theatrical for audiences back home. And repeatedly bringing up an issue, raking an issue without any facts, without any fresh facts, without any frameworks, in fact, I feel is counterproductive. Even those few friends or sympathizers or supporters who might wish to believe in you or support you, even they would get isolated. So I think their track record, which is pretty much miserable, speaks for itself. And while we are talking about this, let's not forget Osama bin Laden, after all those denials, where was he? Where was he found? In Pakistan. Need I say more?
Absolutely. No one needs to say this, most certainly not India. But ma'am, how do you view Pakistan's failed efforts at trying to shape perceptions by exploiting its non-permanent membership to the council? That's what it's trying to do right now.
Well, to be very honest, Pakistan is a non-permanent member of the UNSC, and their term has just begun. Don't forget. So they have at least 1.5 years more to go. So what you saw very recently please expect more of the same. There will be more such meetings. There will be more such attempts. And as their presidency approaches, certainly you can expect much more of this. So I'm not surprised. And I think nobody else should be. After all, they have to answer to their audiences back home. And the UN, apart from the various things that it does, is also a theater. It's a venue for countries to reach out to various constituencies, including the constituency back home. So I think we should expect more of this in the course of this non-permanent non-permanent tenure of theirs at the United Nations Security Council.
And India's diplomatic overtures and efforts that have seen all major countries backing it, how do you see the call by President Putin that came to Prime Minister Modi just ahead of the UNSC meeting, really setting the stage really and showing how the world is completely behind India?
Well, as I've already said, I think India's standing is strong. It speaks for itself. I remember my UN days. We were always regarded as a moderate voice, a voice of reason, and importantly, a voice of principle, a very honest broker, a country that spoke not just for itself, but for other countries as well, particularly countries of the global south. And that is India's standing and reputation. As far as the support of member states to India is concerned, I'm not surprised. We have strong and solid relations with almost all countries, and the Prime Minister's own personal rapport, which mind you is very important, his own personal rapport with most world leaders plays a very important role in this regard. So why just President Putin? This kind of support would naturally be expected of a country with the stature, standing and profile of India, particularly today.
Indeed, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pruchira Kamboj, for joining us to really decode those big developments at the UNSC and explaining in no uncertain terms what really happened and how exposed and isolated Pakistan really is. And viewers, bottom line, as far as this issue is concerned, well, there you have it. The mask has slipped and finally the charade is over. For too long, Pakistan has actually used this terror playbook. When Khwaja Asif admits to doing the West's dirty laundry and dirty work, and General Munir declares a holy war, the world doesn't need a translator. It sees the writing on the wall. The world's patience is now wearing thin, and the generals of Pakistani army as well as the ISI are now on borrowed time. If India is able to ensure that Pakistan doesn't get the next IMF lifeline, its economy will crumble. The flood warning in parts of Sialkot is indicative of how India's suspension of the Indus Water Treaty will be catastrophic for Pakistan. And these, remember viewers, are just the non-military, economic and diplomatic moves New Delhi has made so far. Okay, on that note, we're going to slip into a very short break. And up next, what to know about India's 7th of May mock drills. We come back and talk to you about that. Stay with us. Blackouts, sirens and drills across 244 districts. India isn't just preparing, it is now sending a message. In the aftermath of the Pahalgam massacre, the government has activated the civil defense protocols, not in panic but on purpose and in purpose. While Pakistan shelters terrorists like Lashkar-e-Taiba, peddles false narratives at the UN, India is preparing its people. On the ground, in the classrooms and in cities. Mock drills in Delhi, blackouts in Punjab, evacuation plans in place in Srinagar. The world may be watching, but India is ready. Ready to protect, ready to respond, and ready to call out the enemy by name and act if necessary. Now, what is set to happen tomorrow? What is the exercise aiming to achieve? What are the citizens expected to do? And what is it that the government is hoping to learn after this entire exercise? Let's get in Dr. P.K. Mishra, former ADG BSF, joining me to talk more about what can we expect from tomorrow. Dr. Mishra, explain to us and our viewers the significance of these drills that will take place tomorrow.
Yes, I can well tell you that this mock drill is coming back after 54 years. I have heard it in 1971. In fact, when I was there at Jessore as a Mukti Bahini, I was a fighter for our country, and now I'm going to face it tomorrow itself. Nice of it that the government has decided to inform the civilians how to protect our civilians, in what way we can protect, not only in the border areas where Pakistan may hit, but where the air raid can happen inside the country. We have to give the knowledge to our civilians how to react, how to save themselves, how to save the juniors, how to save the ladies, how to save the students. And this is how the mock drill practice was already, it was going on in Srinagar border areas for last several days. But now it has been decided for in 244 districts tomorrow, the mock drill will be there by about 1600 hours, because the air siren will be blown only when the air raid will be there. And we do not know the target. We do not know where the air raid will be there. What we have to prepare ourselves.
Absolutely.
For that, our NCC, our SDRF, our NDRF, our NSS, our village volunteer force.
Everybody needs to be ready, prepared.
It will be everybody, they are there to teach our students and our civilians how to protect yourself.
Dr. Mishra, I want to understand from you, and I'm sure this is something that the viewers would also be wanting to know, that do you think this will be like a series of steps that will take place? Because there's a generation, you mentioned yourself, after half a century this is happening, there's a generation of people who do not know what will happen tomorrow, and will there be series of steps that will happen later on as well? Is it a one-off drill, or do you think it could be multiple rounds? There could be other aspects that may come up later.
Definitely. As the country will face it, country will see it after 54 years. There may be some people who might not have seen it in 1971. They will be facing it afresh. Though, of course, in Kargil, it was there. It was a skirmishes only in Kashmir, but not all over India. Here what happens, if there will be a war, even if there is a war, the effect would be all over India. So our people, they must be wise enough how to protect themselves, how to save themselves from the air raids. So that is how it has to be taught. It can be only taught if the drills are being prepared, if that is told to them, if the drills can be shown to them also, and if they can practice. There are different ways. If you are there on the field, if you are there in a school, if you are there in a corporate, if you are there in a university, if you are there in an office, how will you prepare yourself, where to go and how to go? How much time you will take to protect yourself, and which
That's
place
the important part. That's the important part.
How SDRF, NDRF and NSS, how they will evacuate.
Yeah, how will they all, these agencies come together and work together? That's a very important aspect you mentioned, Dr. Mishra. Thank you so much for giving that insight. We're going to come back and revisit this story tomorrow again, simply because this is important. As I said, this is preparation to ensure that the citizens of this country are prepared, not in panic, but in preparation. And that's the reason why it's important to bring out that distinction very clearly. And as India prepares for the mock drills that will take place tomorrow, I'm now turning focus to the neighborhood where in Bangladesh, the three-time Prime Minister of the country, Khaleda Zia, has returned. She has returned to Dhaka, and her party, known to have had a long history of association with Islamist ideology, Zia and her party has also, interestingly, viewers, run out of patience with interim advisor Muhammad Yunus. Zia has sought accountability about the roadmap towards democratic transition, or the lack of it, for Bangladesh. 9 months since Sheikh Hasina's ouster, Nobel laureate Muhammad Yunus, once a global symbol of microfinance and morality, is now leading an interim government that is, well, some would say long on rhetoric and short on results. Elections were promised, dates were floated, but democracy cannot be deferred like debt repayment. The clock is ticking, Bangladesh is watching. Will Yunus deliver democracy or delay it under the guise of even more reforms? The world is asking. Another voice joining that is Khaleda Zia, prominent opposition leader, known for her extreme positions. But in this case, the story is important because we are asking yet another prominent voice in Bangladesh, asking for what many have been talking about long enough: elections. Faisal Mahmood, the Minister of Press at the Bangladesh High Commission in New Delhi, joins me to talk more about this. Faisal, there's yet another voice, a prominent voice in Bangladeshi politics that's joining in the chorus about asking for elections. BNP, in fact, has been very vocal that they're getting impatient, that an election roadmap has not been announced as yet. How do you see Khaleda Zia's return to Bangladesh and its impact on the immediate impact on Bangladeshi politics?
Thank you, Gauri. First of all, let me clarify that the interim government has given a time frame from December to June, but they haven't fixed a particular month or particular date yet to hold the elections. Now come to the point of Khaleda Zia's return. Khaleda Zia, she's known as an uncompromising leader. I mean, she had been the prime minister for 3 times, and she's probably the most beloved leaders in Bangladesh's recent history. She's obviously a big force, but I think the mantle of Bangladesh Nationalist Party has already been passed to her son, Tariq Rahman, who is still in London, and he hasn't come back yet. But the demand of BNP to hold an election is getting louder, and for obvious reasons, because BNP is very agitated because they want to know an exact date when it will take place, and the interim government hasn't given them that. But I think since Khaleda Zia has returned and she is now in better health, because before that she has been suffering from a lot of ailments, and she, her political opposition, I mean the Awami League, used to portray her as a terminally ill leader who has plunged into political irrelevance. But it proved that Khaleda Zia is, Khaleda Zia is very much relevant in Bangladesh's current landscape. Because,
she's relevant. I'm asking you that exact same question. We are having that conversation for that reason, Faisal. But let me ask you this. That, of course, BNP would think that with Sheikh Hasina's political relevance reduced, she not being part of the landscape right now is going to have a major impact and boost the BNP's chances, which is why they're likely to be impatient. Do you think Khaleda Zia's return to Bangladeshi politics is going to act as a fresh impetus for Mohammed Yunus to announce elections earlier?
I'm not in a position to answer that directly, but I think yes. To be honest, Khaleda Zia's return and the subsequent, the possible return of her son as well, will obviously put pressure on the interim government to give an exact date to hold elections. But I'm not seeing this as like that, because you mentioned that Hasina and Awami League is no longer in the scene, and because of good reason, because of what they did back in last July and August. But BNP, yes, if you ask any common citizen in Bangladesh, they'll probably tell you that BNP is the party in waiting, and they'll probably come to power if a free and fair election is taking place.
Yes, which is why she wants the elections. Yes, indeed.
Yes.
All right, Faisal, we leave it there. Thanks much for joining me. And this time around, we had a conversation that did not veer into any other sidetracks. On that note, I'm going to slip into a short break. Up next, Donald Trump blocks key funding to Harvard. What's the message to Ivy League universities and the larger impact on international students? We come back with a big voice to talk more about this. USISPF's Mukesh Aghi and lots more. Stay with us. Ivory towers are under fire in the US as the battle between Harvard and Donald Trump explodes into a full-blown standoff. The world's richest university faces a funding freeze, federal fury, and a president demanding total control. Is this about accountability or academic intimidation? This report tells you more.
Tensions between the Trump administration and Harvard University have reached new heights as the federal government continues its clampdown on the richest university in the world. In the latest round of the Trump versus Harvard fight, the US Department of Education has announced that the institution would not be eligible for any new federal grants. Continuing with its defiant tone, Harvard has said that it will continue to defend against illegal government overreach aimed at stifling research and innovation. Some of the key things that the Trump administration wants from Harvard are elimination of diversity programs and overhauling of the university's governance structure. These demands have been rejected by the Ivy League institution. So, how will this freeze affect Harvard? Like other top research institutions, Harvard relies on federal money to support many of its projects. In 2024, government-sponsored research dollars accounted for about 11% of its revenue. And although Harvard's endowment is worth more than $53 billion, much of that money is restricted. A continued freeze on new grants could mean financial turmoil for the institution. To offset these threats, Harvard is already working on some contingency plans. According to reports, the university is looking to raise money through the bond markets. However, the big question remains, how far is Trump willing to go to control one of the most respected places of research on the planet? With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
India and the UK on Tuesday have announced a broad trade deal that removes tariffs on a majority of goods and services in a move that could serve as precursor to similar pacts that have been signed between New Delhi and other nations, including the US. Let's quickly now get in my colleague Disha Bakshi to break this down for us in greater detail in terms of the India-UK Free Trade Pact that has just been announced by Prime Minister Modi in terms of the negotiations that have been going on between India and the UK for some time now, and that has finally led to a big breakthrough in terms of the trade talks and trade negotiations that have finally fructified into a trade pact. Historic milestone, and Prime Minister has announced that on the platform X. Let's quickly now get in Disha Bakshi to fill us in with the very latest on this. Disha, this is a big breakthrough that has happened between India and UK. Fill us in.
Absolutely, this is a major breakthrough, and this comes after talks between India and UK had really fast-tracked since the past year, since Keir Starmer won the election last year and further was boosted, and it was, in fact, the talks were fast-tracked after US President Donald Trump came back to office and really started with his flip-flopping policies over tariffs, really pushed India and UK to now reach this historic deal. In fact, the two in the tweet that Prime Minister Modi, where he announced this historic deal, he mentioned that this is a historic milestone in the bilateral strategic partnership between the two countries, which will now foster trade, investment, innovation, and job creation in both these countries. So there were various sticking points when it comes to this historic landmark deal that has now been reached, and these sticking points included certain demands from India regarding visa relaxations for both students as well as workers who wanted from India who wanted to go to the UK. But now it seems that those sticking points those sticking points have in fact been removed, and now we have reached this historic landmark deal between India and UK. In fact, now it will reduce any trade barriers that existed between the two countries. And in fact, talking about the trade relationship between the two countries, UK is one of the top trading, one of India's top trading partners, and now this deal will open up new avenues of cooperation between the two countries.
That is the big story that's coming in right now on India Global. Prime Minister Modi, in a tweet on platform X, announced that this is a historic milestone, and he said that he's looking forward to meeting Prime Minister Keir Starmer in India soon, following an April 28th visit to London by Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal. Both sides have anticipated concluding this trade talks for some time. And in fact, this comes even as, Disha, there's been a lot of back and forth, isn't it, on these trade talks. They have been on again, off again, on again, off again. So to that extent, it sends out a very strong message, doesn't it, that when it comes to trade talks, India is now moving ahead fast and it wants to conclude these deals. And some of the other negotiations may also gather pace now.
Absolutely. There was a lot of back and forth between India and UK over the past decade or so. But now with Keir Starmer coming to office and of course the US is continuous flip-flopping when it comes to their tariff policy, really push both countries to get over these sticking points when it comes to tariff rules around whiskey, around automobiles, around pharmaceuticals, of course, the visa demands that India was making. These are some of the various sticking points that were really, there were concerns from both sides regarding how to get over these sticking points. But now with this deal being closed, it is, now we have crossed over and gotten over these sticking points. And in fact, there were various visits by UK trade officials to India over the past couple of months. We saw Jonathan Reynolds in India a couple of months ago, and even Piyush Goyal, our trade minister, was in fact in London just last week. And now we have seen that this landmark deal has been signed. And these are big wins, not for whiskey, for cars, for UK exports such as Scotch whiskey and luxury cars, which were, two of the major sectors that have been hit by Donald Trump's tariffs.
Yes.
He has in fact imposed 25% auto tariffs on the industry. So now with this deal, it really helps these UK exports, but also Indian
Yes.
students who have been facing certain raised restrictions from UK earlier.
All right, Disha, stay with me because I want to quickly now get in Scott Lucas as well to talk more about the impact this has in terms of the larger India-UK relationship, the impact this has on India's trade talks that are also progressing with some of the other countries, and the message it sends out to probably one of the most contentious set of trade negotiations that are taking place, that is with the US as well. But Prime Minister Modi announced it just a day after it seemed that these conversations may take longer. It seemed that there was some sort of a stalling in those negotiations, but I guess it was the intent from the highest office of the land that really pushed these negotiations forward, which is why closure has happened with Prime Minister Modi announcing the same. Bilateral investment agreement, the FTA, and the social security pact called the Double Contribution Convention Agreement are essentially the four key aspects that were being discussed between India and UK. Remember, there's also the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is to be introduced in about 2 years from now, along with data localization clauses. That was some of the contentious issues between the two sides, India and the UK. All right, let's go back to Disha and talk more about, Disha, there were some critical factors. There were some, I wouldn't say deal breakers because we have a deal in place, but there were some roadblocks, weren't there? And the interesting thing would be to watch out for and identify what really was the final give and take that led to these talks concluding.
So, of course, apart from the sticking points that I mentioned, another breaking point was, in fact, the carbon tax. India had certain concerns about UK and its carbon tax, and that was also one of the sticking points that have now been overcome and this deal has been reached. But apart from that, as I mentioned, there were concerns over, of course, India's demands over visa relaxation. And apart from that, of course, UK had certain demands regarding reducing tariffs and import taxes duties that India had. But it seems now these sticking points have been over.
In fact, Disha, stay with me because I want to quickly now rope in Scott Lucas as well, who's joining us live to talk more about the impact this has. He's a professor of US international politics, in fact, University of Birmingham in the UK. Professor Lucas, now this is a very important development that has happened, sets the pace in terms of what lies ahead between the India-UK trade relationship and the give and take that would have finally happened leading to these breakthrough in talks. Your first reaction to this news that we are putting out and breaking right now on India Global?
My first reaction is that this is a win-win for both India and the UK for slightly different reasons. Although the fundamental is that you try to encourage free trade. For the UK, of course, this is after years of struggle, trying to get a significant free trade agreement to offset the economic damage of Brexit. The negotiations for this, ironically, began under the Conservative government that oversaw Brexit. They began under Boris Johnson. But of course, the whole idea of a US-UK trade deal never came about, probably won't come about. Donald Trump's tariffs have made that a more remote possibility. The UK needed something to show people economically that it is not isolated. For India, it's that idea of opening up, expanding into obviously a very large market, one of India's largest markets. It also opens up the idea of India-UK military cooperation, which is quite important, and it offsets China, which of course has the alternative economic model for development. But I think also something which is beyond where we were in these negotiations in 2021 is it is different because of the threat that the US is withdrawing from the global trading system. Both countries need alternative partners to cover for what might be a loss of US markets. And what made this deal possible? Let's just be very blunt here. It was held up for a long time because the same conservative government that was proposing free trade also was restricting immigration, especially immigration from countries like India. It will be interesting to see if the Labour government, despite right-wing pressure, has said, no, we are not restricting Indian students, Indian workers who come in and contribute to the British economy.
Indeed, that's a very important point you're making. And that's really one of the issues in these negotiations, isn't it? The flow and movement of people. Remember, India is a large services exporter, and concerns and restrictions around immigration have a direct impact when it comes to India's export of services. So that ends up becoming a bit of a roadblock. Interestingly, Scott, one of the things that the Prime Minister has put out, in fact, the statement that has come in says that it will help unlock new potential for the two countries to jointly develop products and services for global markets, indicating the kind of potential that this really throws up in a very protectionist trade environment with a lot of global trade uncertainties.
Well, let's talk about a couple of those examples. India has a very large pharmaceuticals market. The UK, my daughter happens to have worked in the industry, has a very vibrant pharmaceuticals industry as well. Can you make this a win-win relationship in terms of moving back and forth in terms of medical technology? Let's talk about high tech and the possibilities in AI. We have talked for a long time about the US with people like Elon Musk supposedly being the dominant AI power, or China. India and UK have a great deal of high tech and AI potential. Can they establish a cooperative relationship to develop? And then let's talk about sectors which have been in a bit of trouble. The UK steel industry is in a dire state right now. One of its last major steel producers, perhaps its last domestic steel producer, has lost its Chinese owner and has effectively had to be nationalized. Is there a possibility that India, which was a player in the UK steel market, can come back in? So yes, there are potential here for cooperation while keeping eyes open that the two countries also do compete in certain markets as well. And that will continue despite a free trade agreement.
Absolutely. I'm going to slip into a break, but I'm going to come back to this biggest story that is breaking in right now. The India-UK trade pact, its impact going forward on a larger basis for India, becoming the biggest destination for global companies to come in as they look to diversify away from China, burnishes India's credentials where it keeps on negotiating but is not able to close trade deals. What does it mean for the other set of negotiations that we are having with America? We come back and talk on all that and more. Stay with us. Viewers, if you're tuning in right now to India Global, the big story that we are focusing on right now, the India-UK trade pact that has been in talks for not months but years has finally happened. The breakthrough was achieved at the highest political office level between the prime ministers. Prime Minister Modi announced that on social media a short while back. The free trade pact between India and UK is set to act as a major boost for trade and investment between the two countries and will also act as a major driver for investments for India at a time of great global trade uncertainties. It will also mean that India, in fact, two big ramifications of this for India. One, it is a negotiator looking to close deals, something that it hasn't been able to do so in the past, but now it will be viewed as a negotiator looking to close deals. And the second other important fact and the big takeaway before I get in Scott Lucas is that it sets a precedent as to how companies looking to diversify away from China, it will further boost India's credentials. And Scott Lucas, let me ask you on that in terms of the upside that we're looking at. One is the upside for the India-UK bilateral trade that will really boost. And second is the upside for India as a big destination for global investment, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. I mean, if we go beyond the UK, at this moment, the effect of Donald Trump's tariffs, and I'm sure you all know this, is that Apple, for example, who produces the iPhone in China, is looking to move production to India because there's a much lower tariff on Indian goods going into the US rather than China. But if you think about it, and we take the US to the side, if you're a UK company and you're looking at where you could set up factories, if you're looking at where you could set up your high-tech investment, do you go into the US market, which is a very uncertain market now in terms of the amount of burden that you might have to pay, given what the Trump administration is doing? Or do you go into an India, which is moving from, and let's be honest here, is moving from what has been a relatively high tariff country to one which is looking to reduce those tariffs? Again, I have to emphasize that while the UK and India, are not completely dependent on Washington, each of these countries had investment interest, but they could not get the breakthrough until February. They resumed the talks. Why did they resume the talks in February? In part because the Labour government has finally settled in the UK, but in part because they see what's happening with the US. And this is the effect of Donald Trump holding up that magic chart saying, look, if you want to sell your products in the United States, you're going to have to pay a 26% tariff or a 30 or a 40% tariff. Is that both Indian companies and UK companies thought we need to start looking at each other. And importantly, not just in terms of goods, where a lot of the discussion is around, but also in terms of services. And there is a room for a great deal of expansion for both countries in the services sectors, which tended to be led in recent years by the United States.
All right. In fact, Scott, as we go through and await the fine print from the two sides in terms of what the trade pact really is all about, well, what I can say is that in terms of, if we're to talk in pounds, the UK-India total trade last year was about 41 billion pounds and is expected to, of course, grow at a fast pace. And in fact, the boost by the trade pact could be an additional 25 billion pounds a year by 2040. So a 15-year upside is that it could be 25 billion pounds every year if the trade pact does come through. So that's the kind of upside that is available immediately for the two sides. We are talking about external factors. We're talking about the fact that there is a push that's come in because of Donald Trump and his trade tariffs. But one also needs to now focus in terms of what it means for the two exporters of the two countries, because when you talk about trade pacts, it boils down to first that areas where you want tariffs to come down, areas and industries where you want to protect your domestic manufacturers. That's really the balance between getting that trade pact going. Professor Lucas, for the UK, whiskey will be a big upside along with a couple of other sectors.
Absolutely. I mean, the UK effectively shut itself off from the European market. It, in effect, imposed a tariff on its own goods going into the EU when it withdrew from what was a zero tariff area, a common market. So again, the UK, in effect, had isolated itself. Now, they're not going to go back into the EU. They're not even going to go back into a single European market. You have to look elsewhere.
In fact, Scott, stay with us because I want to quickly now get in another important guest joining me as well to talk more about this. His first thoughts Jasper Reed, who's a British entrepreneur, joining us to talk more about what this means for entrepreneurs, for businesses like you, Jasper. What is the kind of potential that you expect for businesses from this trade pact?
Hi. Listen, I think it's great news. I mean, hats off to both of the team. This has been a decade in the making. These are not easy things to do. So everybody should pause to congratulate themselves. Look, I think here it's a big trading relationship anyway. This is a great signal. It will affect certain sectors. But I think more importantly, in an uncertain world, it's a very, very clear statement strategically of the UK and India becoming ever closer aligned.
And in terms of specific sectors where you feel the upside would be more, the potential would be most, Jasper?
Well, I think that's well trailed. I mean, I think there are, if you're looking at the movement of people to the UK, I think that will benefit people clearly, and this has been well advertised. UK whiskey exporters will do well. Basically, it pushes down tariffs across a wide range of areas. And I think that's very good news in the sense that historically, India has had high tariff rates. And that's been a barrier to importers into India.
Very quickly, I want to ask this to both of you, which is that specifically, the one thing in the statement that stands out is that both countries now will be able to explore areas where they can produce together for global markets. Which are these sectors are we talking about? Are we talking about semiconductors or something more old school? Jasper, to you first.
Well, I was writing about this today. In essence, if you take this back to the core competencies in the country, both countries have spectacular research, education, high-end science and tech capability. And I am very, very optimistic that both markets can find ways to work together. Because in the end, there's a whole bunch of needs in Western markets like the UK, and there's a whole bunch of skills and capability in India. So for me, the much, much bigger game is strategic deals where intellectual property, movement of talent, hardcore research in AI, in neuroscience, in quantum. These are fantastic areas. They're much, much bigger than Scotch.
Of course, that is the first low-hanging fruit, not so low-hanging for the UK trade negotiators. But definitely there's a huge, huge development that has happened in the India-UK trade talks have finalized. They've led to a trade pact, the first in a series, hopefully, given that there are many other negotiations that are on for India. On that note, completely timed out in this edition of India Global. Thanks so very much for watching.